The human who entered the forbidden cave. Daniel wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed through the thick alien jungle. The air was hot and wet, and every step made his boots sink into soft, strange moss. His scanner beeped softly in his hand, its blue light flickering toward the cliff wall ahead. He stopped in front of it, breathing hard, eyes focused on a crack barely visible in the stone. "This is it," he whispered, more to himself than to his drone hovering behind him. Cave was not marked on any map, not listed in any human record, but Daniel had found it in a dream, one that came night after night since he stepped foot on this planet. Voice calling, soft and ancient, telling him to come. He stepped forward and pressed his hand against the rock. To his shock, it vibrated under his palm. Symbols lit up faintly in gold and violet lines, tracing shapes his mind couldn't understand. Then with a low, grinding sound, the rock opened, revealing a dark tunnel beyond. Daniel took a breath and entered the cave. Inside, the air was dry and cold, different from the jungle heat outside. Glowing crystals lined the walls, casting soft purple light. His scanner fizzled and died. The readings were too strange, too old. As he moved deeper, he noticed carvings in the stone. They showed tall, elegant beings with glowing hair and sharp eyes. But all of them were women. Not a single male figure was seen in any of the art. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber. It was a dome-shaped room with a floor of smooth black glass. In the center stood a crystal pod, tall and shaped like a flower bud. Inside it lay a woman, an alien woman, unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. She was beautiful, her skin a soft glow of pale silver, her hair floating around her like silk and water. She looked young, peaceful, asleep for a very long time. The crystal pulsed slowly, as if breathing. Daniel stepped closer, unable to look away. Suddenly, the chamber began to hum. Warm wind swept across the room from nowhere, and the symbols on the walls lit up again. His presence was triggering something. The pot opened. With a quiet hiss, the crystal petals unfolding like a flower in the sun. The girl's eyes opened, glowing silver like starlight. She gasped sharply, then sat up, her gaze locked on Daniel. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you are not one of us." And then, without warning, she collapsed forward, right into Daniel's arms. He caught her carefully, stunned by how light she felt. She was warm, her skin smooth like polished stone. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Daniel looked around, unsure what to do next. "Are you recording this?" he asked aloud, but his drone was silent, completely dead. No signal, no light, no sound. They were truly alone down here. Daniel carried the girl to a flat platform near the edge of the room. He laid her down gently and checked her pulse. It was fast but not dangerous. As he stood up, he noticed the walls begin to shift, images moving as if they were alive. Scenes from a forgotten time played out before his eyes. He saw the alien girl standing among hundreds like her, council of women in robes speaking with fear and urgency. A great war, and then silence, a choice made asleep to wait. Then he saw it. The last image was of a single male figure being erased from the records, not dead but removed, deleted from history. Daniel stepped back, his heart pounding. "What is this place?" he whispered. Suddenly the girl stirred, her hand reaching up to grab his sleeve. "You are human," she said weakly. He nodded, shocked that she knew the word. "I'm Daniel," he replied, Gently, her eyes softened and a tear rolled down her cheek. I have been alone for so long, she whispered. Then her hand dropped and she slipped back into sleep. Daniel sat beside her, staring at the ancient walls. He didn't know what he had awakened, but deep in his chest, something told him this was only the beginning. The cave trembled slightly, as if warning him that more was coming far away, beneath layers of rock and time. Something ancient opened one eye. The awakening of the girl had triggered more than just memories. It had stirred the watchers, and now they were listening. The world that forgot Manuel and awoke slowly, her eyes flickering like the stars trapped in ice. She found herself lying on a flat stone surface covered by a strange cloth that felt rough yet warm. The air smelled different, less clean than the stasis chamber filled with dust, time, and him. She turned her head and saw the human sitting with his back against the crystal wall, watching her with tired but calm eyes. You didn't leave, she whispered, her voice still weak. Daniel smiled slightly and nodded. You passed out, he said. I couldn't leave you like that. Oren sat up slowly, her body aching in unfamiliar ways. For a long moment she stared at him, this male creature with strong arms and a gentle voice. Her mind raced with warnings, memories, and training from 10,000 years ago. Males were unstable, unpredictable, and dangerous. They were the reason her people went into eternal sleep, or so she had been taught. But nothing about this human seemed dangerous. He had not harmed her, not even when she was helpless. He had watched over her like a guardian, not an invader. What are you? She asked, voice still cautious. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Human, he said. Earthborn explorer and very lost. Arlen looked away, unsure if she could believe him. She touched her chest, feeling the pulse of her own heart. It beat faster than usual, not from fear, but from something else. Confusion, curiosity, maybe even attraction. She shook her head and stood up slowly. The chamber shimmered again, and the walls displayed new images, scenes of peace, villages, festivals, laughter, and life. Then came fire, war, and chaos, and then a council of women speaking gravely, their eyes hard. They erased them, Arlen said quietly. Daniel stepped closer. Erased who? Oren looked at him, silver tears in her eyes. The males, she whispered. They blamed them for everything and removed them from our future. Daniel didn't speak for a moment. The silence between them felt thick with history and regret. Finally, he said, that's a heavy decision for anyone to make. Arlen nodded. We believed it was the only way to survive. She walked toward the center of the chamber. More images danced around her. Training centers, cloning facilities, and stasis chambers. She was one of thousands put to sleep, waiting for a time when the world was safe again. But the plan had failed. There were no males to balance their evolution. The race began to decay. Slowly, clones lost strength, memories faded, and minds became weak. The last council gave the order, shut everything down, sleep and forget. Forget the males, forget the pain, forget everything that could break the system. Oren turned to Daniel. Why now? She asked. Why did you wake me? Daniel shrugged. I followed a signal. Something was calling me. Oren's eyes widened. You heard the echo? The echo? Daniel asked. Arlen nodded, walking to a glowing panel on the wall. She placed her hand on it, and a soft voice filled the air, ancient and feminine. Only the balance can wake The seed, the voice said, only the forgotten can open the future. Daniel stared at her, his heart pounding. What does that mean? He asked. It means, she said softly, you were never meant to find this place, yet only you could. The chamber dimmed suddenly, and a deep vibration ran through the floor. Oren looked up sharply. They've sensed me, she whispered. Who? Daniel asked, alarmed. The Watchers, she said, her voice trembling. The Guardians left behind to stop any male who ever awakened us. Daniel grabbed his gear. Quickly, we have to get out of here, he said. Oren hesitated, looking back at the pod where she had slept for thousands of years. Can I even survive outside this place? She asked quietly. Daniel walked up to her and extended his hand. You already are, he said. She stared at his hand, then slowly placed hers in it. Warmth passed between them, strange and undeniable. Together they ran down a side tunnel. The walls behind them pulsed red, the system alerting hidden machines that a breach had begun. Ahead, a stone door slid open, revealing a staircase winding downward into darkness. Oren looked back one last time, then followed Daniel into the unknown. Far above, a broken star blinked in the sky, and far below, a slumbering force began to rise. The world that forgot men was waking again, and this time it would not forget so easily. The awakening echoes, the staircase beneath the chamber twisted down into silence. Each step echoed softly, swallowed by the ancient stone walls. Daniel held a small flashlight in one hand, but even that beam felt weaken the heavy darkness. Orlin walked behind him, her silver eyes adjusting to the black with unnatural ease. This path was never meant to be opened again, she whispered. Daniel glanced back at her. Then why is it here? She touched the wall gently, fingers tracing symbols no human could read. It was a secret route, a way to escape if the system failed, she replied. After an hour of walking, the stairs opened into a vast underground hall. The ceiling was so high Daniel couldn't see it, even with the flashlight. Massive pillars rose like trees carved with scenes of a time long before his birth. Each pillar showed women, always women, but now some were crying, others screaming. And then he saw it. The final pillar had been scorched, blackened, and cracked down. The middle, where a male figure once stood, only a jagged hole remained. Someone tried to erase him completely. Daniel murmured. Oren stood still, her expression unreadable. I remember this place, she said slowly. This was where the last vote was cast. What vote? Daniel asked. The vote to end our kind. As it was, she answered, the vote to erase all memory of men. Suddenly, a pulse of light rippled across the walls. A deep chime rang out like a bell from the stars, then silence. Orlin gasped and clutched her chest, falling to her knees. Daniel rushed to her side. What's happening? She shook her head, teeth clenched. They're waking up, she whispered. The other chambers there activating. Daniel looked around in disbelief. You mean more like you? Oren nodded, sweat beading on her glowing skin. They were linked, all of us, she said. When I awakened, I sent a signal. Without meaning to. Daniel helped her up, heart racing. How many? He asked. Thousands, she breathed, but not all are like me. Daniel froze. What do you mean? Some were guardians, she said, soldiers, trying to protect our history, even if it meant killing anyone who opposed it. They will come for you, she added quietly, because you are the first male in 10,000 years. Before he could Respond, a loud cracking sound echoed. Through the chamber, a nearby wall split. Open, and from within it, a mechanical arm reached out. It was sleek, sharp, and humming with energy. A defense unit, ancient and still deadly, had just awakened, run, or shouted, grabbing his arm. Together they darted through a tunnel lined with glowing vines and crumbling technology. The unit followed, gliding on long limbs, scanning the for Daniel's presence. It wasn't targeting Orlin, only him. This system is built to erase any male that enters, she cried. Daniel dodged a burst of light that struck the stone beside him. Sparks flew as the ceiling rumbled. They turned a sharp corner and slammed into a sealed metal door. No code, Orland gasped. It's locked. Daniel dropped his gear and knelt, opening a side panel. He pulled out his old earth tool kit and began slicing wires. The unit closed in behind them, now charging its core weapon. Oren stood between Daniel and the machine. Her hands glowed with bioenergy summoned from a core inside her body. She released a pulse that knocked the machine backward for a second. Faster, she yelled, teeth gritted. I've almost got it, Daniel shouted, and just then, click, the door opened with a hiss. They jumped inside as the machine fired and the blast hit the door as it slammed shut. Inside the new room, everything was silent again. They both breathed heavily, shaking. That was too close, Daniel said. Arlene leaned against the wall, her body flickering with weak light. You risked your life for me, she said softly. Daniel looked at her, sweat on his brow. We're in this together now, she blinked, her expression softening. No one ever said that to me before, she whispered. They sat down to rest, surrounded by machines and panels that hadn't worked in centuries, but something had changed. The system was no longer asleep, and every echo of Daniel's presence was spreading through the ancient network. Oren touched one panel, and a map of the planet appeared. Red lights blinked slowly, then faster. Chambers were opening, signals were crossing, and watchers were rising. The past was coming back, and it was hunting them both. Daniel looked at the blinking lights, his hands clenched into fists. If we woke them up, he said, we'll have to face them. Arlen nodded. And maybe show them that a future with males isn't something to fear. Asterisk City. Beneath the bones, the door opened into cold silence. A vast space stretched before them, dimly lit by veins of glowing crystal that pulsed faintly. The walls, it felt like walking into a graveyard that once breathed, laughed, and lived. Arlen stepped forward, slowly, her eyes wide with awe. This was once the heart of Altha, she whispered, our ancient capital. Daniel looked around, stunned by the beauty and the weight of it all. The city had been carved directly into the bones of the mountain. Towering structures of transparent stone rose from the ground like frozen lightning. Above them, skeletal bridges crisscrossed like spiderweb webs made of pearl and glass. Everything was silent, but not dead, only sleeping. And now, thanks to them, the city was beginning to stir. Lights flickered across buildings, awakening systems untouched for 10,000 years. As they walked through what once had been a grand plaza, Daniel stopped. A massive sculpture stood in the center, broken and incomplete. It was a statue of two figures, one female, one male, but only half the male remained. His face was shattered, erased by force or time. They tried to forget, Daniel said softly. Oren nodded. The male part of our society was removed like a sickness. Why Would they destroy history like that? He asked because it made them feel safe. She replied, even if it made us. Incomplete, they reached a circular platform in front of a large dome. Arlen placed her hand on the center panel and it glowed under her fingers. The dome slowly opened like a flower, revealing a chamber of floating data. Crystal, a smooth female voice echoed. Welcome, daughter of the line, Arlen stepped forward and bowed her head. I seek the truth, she said. The crystals rotated in midair, playing images from the past, full-color holograms that flickered with age. They showed a time when men and women lived in harmony, building wonders together, then conflict, ideological wars, genetic experiments gone wrong. The males began changing, some losing control, others becoming aggressive. The council declared them unstable and voted for permanent separation. Only a few protested, but their voices were silenced. The last memory showed the moment the male DNA archive was locked away, sealed deep within the city, marked as too dangerous to preserve. Then the stasis order was issued. Orleans people would sleep until a solution appeared, but none came. Until Daniel stepped closer, watching the past unfold before his eyes. I think I know why I was drawn here, he said quietly. Oren turned to him. Tell me. Daniel held up the small metal tag he wore, a military dog tag, passed through generations. My great-grandfather vanished on a space mission near this system, he explained. I was always told he had found something ancient. Maybe, he continued. His DNA carried a signature that matched your people's lost archive. That's why the cave responded to me. Arlen stared at him, realization dawning in her eyes. You're the key, she whispered. You're the missing code. Suddenly alarms echoed through the chamber. Red lights flashed on the edges of the platform. Voice announced, unauthorized male presence detected in core sanctuary. Daniel looked around, heart pounding. How do they still see me as a threat? Because they were programmed that way, Arlen replied, to protect what remained. Even from truth, mechanical drones emerged from the shadows, sleek and sharp with glowing red sensors. They hovered around the chamber, weapons charged. Daniel raised his hands, stepping back. They're not giving me a chance to explain. Oren moved in front of him, arms outstretched. Deactivate, she commanded. He is not the enemy. The drones hesitated, systems flickering. Then one launched a warning blast at the floor near Daniel's feet. The explosion threw him back against the wall. Oren screamed and unleashed a pulse of energy from her palms. The drone staggered, systems glitching. One fell and shattered on the floor, sparks flying. She rushed to Daniel, helping them up. I can't stop them all, she said breathlessly. We need to reach the core archive, Daniel said. If I can upload my DNA, it might override the system. Arlen nodded. It's beneath the hall of memory. This way. They ran through a collapsing tunnel as the city groaned awake. Old systems were waking, confused and angry. Watchers stirred in vaults long thought dead. The balance was shifting, and the old ways were resisting. But Daniel and Arlen ran forward, not to destroy the past, but to fix it. Behind them the drones gave chase. Ahead the city's heart waited, locked behind layers of security and fear. The path would not be easy, but in Orlan's eyes for the first time was not fear but hope. Truth of the male purge. The hall of memory was buried deep beneath the ancient city. No lights welcomed them there, only silence and the sound of distant machines waking up. From slumber, Oren led the way with slow, careful steps, her hand glowing faintly to guide their path. Daniel followed close, bruised from the last blast but moving with quiet determination. They passed beneath arches etched with forgotten names. The air grew colder with every step, heavy with something unspoken. At the center of the chamber stood a sealed black door, smooth like obsidian, no panel, no keyhole, just a circular depression the size of a human hand. Daniel stepped forward. Without hesitation, he placed his palm against the cold surface. For a moment nothing happened, then the entire room began to hum with low energy. A gentle voice, calm and ancient, spoke from above. Genetic pattern recognized. It said partial male. Data match, access granted. The door split open soundlessly, revealing a small round room filled with glowing strands of suspended memory. Each strand held a sliver of truth, protected for 10,000 years. Beneath stone and silence, Orlin stepped in slowly, her eyes reflecting the swirling lights. These are the lost archives, she whispered, records that were forbidden to even speak of. Daniel walked among the memory strands like someone stepping through ghosts. He reached for one that pulsed softly at his presence. The moment he touched it, the room changed. They were no longer in the chamber, they were inside the memory itself, floating in a vision of a time long gone. A council room filled with tall, elegant alien women in glowing robes. The High Council stood before a crowd of scientists and leaders. Holographic displays showed battlefields, cities in flames, and failed genetic trials. In the center of the room stood a male, tall, dark-haired, calm but chained. This is him, Arlen whispered, the last voice of the male faction. The council's voices echoed. The males cannot be controlled, one said. They resist evolution, said another. They threaten the balance we've built, declared the high speaker. The man raised his voice, strong but tired. You created us, he said, then feared us when we became your equals. We offered partnership, he continued, but you chose power over unity. The room fell silent until the high speaker turned away. Purge the male records, she said coldly. Seal the DNA archives and erase their memory from our history. Cries rose from the few who disagreed, but they were dragged away by machines, their fates unknown. The man's eyes burned with sorrow as he was led away. The memory ended abruptly, pulling Daniel and Oren back into the present. She stood frozen, hands clenched, her lips trembling. They lied to us, she said barely above a whisper. They didn't protect us, they stole the truth to keep their power. Daniel looked at her, unsure what to say. She had lived her whole life inside a version of reality shaped by fear. Now the truth shattered that world like glass, and in the cracks something new began to grow. I thought we were perfect, she whispered, but we were only half of what we were meant to be. Daniel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You still have a choice, he said. Oren looked up, eyes filled with fire. Yes, she said, and I will make it. She walked to the center of the archive room and placed both hands on the core crystal. I restore the forbiddens truth, she said loudly. Let the full history return. The crystal responded, glowing bright as waves of memory spread outward like ripples in water. Across the city, lights changed from red to gold. Defense drones paused mid-flight, recalculating their purpose. The ancient Systems reeled as new data flowed. Through them, old lies erased balance. Rewritten, but not everyone welcomed the change. Deep beneath the ruins, a dark chamber opened, a slumbering war machine. Activated, far older than the drones. Above, a Guardian-class Sentinel to eliminate threats to the system, and it now registered Daniel as a Level 1 threat. Back in the archive room, alarms began to blare again. Daniel looked at Arlen, who stood tall and ready. "They're coming," he said. "Let them." She replied, "Because now I know who I really am." The door to the chamber burst open as warning lights filled the tunnel. Daniel grabbed his gear while Arlen charged her energy core. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Not as invader and guardian, but as something new, something neither world had seen before, a future where the truth no longer slept. The choice of the last daughter. The air was thick with tension as the heavy doors slammed shut behind them. Daniel and Arlen stood in a small chamber lined with ancient metal, pulsing dim blue. Like a heartbeat, the archive behind them had gone silent. Its truths now awakened the system, but something else had awakened to something far more dangerous. "The Sentinel is moving," Arlen said, placing her palm on a side panel to scan the city's layout. Daniel looked at the screen where a red dot was approaching fast through the tunnels. "It's hunting me," he muttered. Arlen turned to him, her face calm but fierce. "No," she said, "it's hunting what you represent, a future that defies the system it was built to protect." Guardian class, since Sentinel had not stirred in 10,000 years, it was the final defense, created not just to destroy intruders but to erase deviation from the original plan. And now Daniel's very existence had triggered it. "We can't outrun it," Daniel said, scanning his gear. "Not for long." Arlen nodded. "Then we stand and choose." "Choose what?" he asked. "To let the past control us," she replied, "or to write a new future, even if it breaks the rules." A rumble shook the floor as the Sentinel entered the outer corridor. Massive humanoid, built of obsidian armor and old starlight. Its face was blank, glowing with ancient command runes. In one hand, it carried a plasma blade longer than Daniel was tall. "Unauthorized mail detected," it boomed. "Eradication in progress." Arlen stepped forward, energy building around her like a shield. Daniel grabbed the disruptor from his pack, though it felt like a toy against such a machine. "I'll distract it," he said, but Arlen stopped him. "No," she said firmly, "I will speak to it first." She stepped into the corridor as the Sentinel raised its blade. "I am Arlen of the last generation," she called out. "You are forbidden from interfering," it replied. "You defend a corrupted code. I defend the truth," she shouted, "and this human carries the key to balance we lost." The Sentinel paused, processing her words. "Balance has failed before," it said. "Male DNA destabilized the collective." Orange shook her head, her voice steady. "No fear." "Did," she answered, "and your kind sealed away what we should have healed." The Sentinel lifted its blade, ready to strike. Daniel raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Arlen placed herself between him and the blade. "If you kill him, you destroy our last chance," she said. "Command you to stand down." The Sentinel halted again, sparks dancing across its joints. It scanned her face, her energy, her identity. "You are of the central line," it confirmed. "Daughter of High Speaker Elith." "Yes," Arlen said, "and I reject her decision." She raised her hands glowing. With raw ancestral power, I choose. Unity, she declared. I choose truth over comfort. A pulse burst from her chest, striking the sentinel like a wave of light. It staggered back, systems flickering wildly. Daniel stepped beside her, adding his hand to hers. Together, their energies merged into a white-hot spiral of data and life. It struck the sentinel again, not to destroy but to rewrite, to remind the old machine that evolution did not mean destruction. The lights across the sentinel's body dimmed, its blade dissolved into mist. Then it fell to one knee. New protocol recognized, it said. Protection redefined. Arlen collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. Daniel caught her just before she fell. You did it, he whispered. She smiled weakly. We did it. The entire city began to change. Towers, once red with warning, turned gold and green. Doors opened, systems rebooted, and sleeping stasis pods across the world began to stir. The age of silence was ending, but Arlen knew what came next would not be easy. Her people would awaken, confused, maybe angry. Some would reject the truth, others might fight it. Daniel helped her to her feet as a soft chime rang across the chamber, a message sent from the city's core. The awakening has begun, the voice said, awaiting guidance. Arlen looked at Daniel, her eyes glowing gently. They will need a leader, he said. They will need hope. She replied. She placed a hand over her chest and then gently over his. Then we lead together, she whispered, and in that moment the last daughter of a broken world made her choice, not for war, not for hiding, not for fear, but for a chance to heal the past by embracing what had been cast away. A new history would begin, written not in silence but in unity, a new dawn for both worlds. The surface of the alien world looked different when they emerged. The sky no longer glowed with warning red pulses from the defense towers. Instead, a calm golden light shimmered across the clouds. It was dawn, but not just the start of a new day. It was the beginning of something the planet had not seen in 10,000 years. Oren stood beside Daniel at the edge of the mountain cave. The wind blew through her silver hair, carrying the scent of life and change below them. The forest stirred and birds returned to places once silent. Daniel took a deep breath of the cool air. It's hard to believe this world was asleep for so long, he said. Oren nodded, her eyes full of thought. And now it has chosen to wake, she whispered. All across the planet, stasis pods were releasing with soft hisses. Womenike. Oren blinked into the light, confused and cautious. Their memories began syncing with the restored archive Orlin had unlocked. And with that truth came questions. In the capital center, a projection of Arlen appeared in every major hall. She stood before her people, not as a ruler, but as the first to step forward. I was the last to sleep and the first to wake, she said, and I come not with commands, but with a choice. She spoke of the hidden truths, the erased histories, the male purge. She showed Daniel standing beside her, not as a threat but as proof of what was lost. Some wept, others shouted, but none turned away. For the first time the people faced the full weight of their own story. Daniel stood quietly as the speech played across screens and sky holograms. He knew this wasn't just about him. It was about what he represented: hope, restoration, and a second chance. Not all would accept him. He understood that, but he also saw something else in the crowd below. children peeking from behind crystal trees, smiling at his earth accent, elders standing in silence, heads bowed not in shame but in reflection. The world was not ready for perfection, but it was ready to grow. Again, later that night beneath a dome of stars, Arlen and Daniel sat together. They shared a quiet meal made from old preserved stores and fresh fruits from the wild. Arlen looked up at the moon, once considered sacred by her people. "Do you think your world will come?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "Once I send the signal they will, but they won't come to conquer," he added. "They'll come to learn and maybe to heal too." Oren smiled, placing a hand gently on her belly. "There will be so much to teach," she whispered. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. "Wait, are you saying?" She nodded slowly. "Our genes were never fully dead, only locked. Your presence, it may have triggered something in me," she said gently. He reached out and took her hand, not as a hero claiming a prize, but as someone humbled by fate. Together they sat in silence, watching stars fall across the sky like memories coming home, and beneath them the world turned slowly, breathing life into a new future. Elsewhere, the sentinel now stood as a guardian, not of law but of peace. It guided others from stasis, protecting instead of destroying. Other AI systems began to reprogram themselves based on the new archive. Balance was no longer feared, it was desired. At last the humans on Earth received Daniel's message, a distorted but powerful signal of peaceful contact. They listened as Arlen's voice echoed across space. "We are not perfect," she said, "but we are ready to learn what unity means." And Earth responded, not with weapons but with wonder. Diplomats, scientists, teachers, and explorers prepared to meet a civilization that once erased half of itself but now opened its arms again. This time no one came to rule. The future would be shared. In the final days of the first month, a memorial was built in Iltha's hat. 2 figures stood side by side, one male, one female, neither taller, neither bowed. Together they reached out toward a rising star carved in crystal. Oren stood before the statue with Daniel at her side. She turned to him, her voice steady. "This world began again because one man stepped into a cave." Daniel smiled, and one woman decided to listen. Together they walked into the crowd, not as legend but as living proof that healing is possible. The past could not be erased, nor should it, but the future, for the first time in 10,000 years, belonged to both worlds. And the stars above, once silent, now watched with quiet pride.